Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. There's a new study out which says that global warming is making U.S. West mega drought worst in modern age. Let's take a look at the actual data and see if that's true. This is the official precipitation graph from NOAA for the western United States. The graph extends back 100 years to the year 1919. The green line is the 5-year mean, and the blue line is the trend. As you can see, the last 5 years have been above average precipitation, and the trend line is slightly upwards. So scientists are saying that we're having the worst megadrought in 1,200 years, only precipitation has been above average for the last 5 or 6 years. This map is from NOAA and shows the percent of normal precipitation for the western U.S. over the last 5 years. Green and blue represents above average precipitation, and yellow and red represents below average precipitation. Most of the western U.S. has been above average precipitation for the past 5 years. There are some areas which have been below average. This is a fairly normal precipitation pattern. Some areas are above normal and some areas are below normal. There's no indication of a megadrought or even an unusual drought at all. This is the current Palmer Drought Index from NOAA. Green areas are wetter than normal, white areas are about normal, and brown and red areas are below normal. More of the western U.S. is wetter than normal than is drier than normal. Now let's compare this to April 1934, when most of the United States was in drought. This is the current drought map, mostly wet, and this was 1934, very dry. I'm pretty sure that 1934 was less than 1,200 years ago. This was Toto a few weeks ago on the Agua Fria River north of Phoenix, Arizona. This river has more water now than it has had since the 1980 flood. And this was one of several spectacular waterfalls I saw in Oak Creek Canyon, Arizona, between Sedona and Flagstaff. I would have to say that this is a pretty wet-looking mega drought. Here's a newspaper article from the New York Times from 1994, back in the days when they still occasionally reported news. Tuesday, July 19, 1994, severe ancient droughts, a warning to California. Beginning about 1,100 years ago, what is now California baked in two droughts. The first lasting 220 years and the second 140 years. Each was much more intense than the mere 6-year dry spells that afflict modern California from time to time now. Now let's compare those past multi-century droughts the state California is in now. Last spring in California, back in the days when they still allowed people to ski, the snow was so deep that people had to tunnel their way out of their houses. And right after that story came out, the San Francisco Chronicle predicted that California skiing was doomed. And a few weeks later, people in California were still skiing in July. In 2016, Governor Brown in the New York Times predicted the permanent drought for California. And the experts at Wired magazine confirmed the permanent drought. The following winter, after the governor in the New York Times announced the California permanent drought, they had their wettest winter ever. California almost had a major catastrophe that winter when the Oroville Reservoir was in danger of bursting. That's a pretty wet-looking permanent drought. Now let's look at the authors of that study who say we're in the worst drought in the past 1,200 years. Two of these authors are from right here in Boulder, Colorado, where we have had 12.5 feet of snow, which is our snowiest winter on record. It's almost like these Boulder scientists never look out the window, or perhaps they just don't care. Money is tight everywhere now, and climate scientists will say whatever they have to say to keep the money coming in. The Anasazi were driven out of the Southwest by a 70-year-long drought in the 13th century. I would guess that if they were around now, they would disagree with the new study from the academics. Visit Toto on the web at RealClimateScience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.